Well, hi everybody. My name is Chris. This is Chee-Tash, and today we welcome back a returning guest, actually. Actually, you're the first returning guest that I've had, Russell Dore. How are you doing?
Good, thanks. It's nice to be back.
It's been a while. You were the first episode we did back in, that must have been the summer last year.
I came out with this new book last spring. So,
Okay.
and I didn't have that one out yet, I don't think. So it was
Oh,
a
okay.
couple years.
Yeah,
Yeah.
wow. I remember too, after that first episode, you gave me a signed copy
Mhm.
of this, and I really appreciate
Mhm.
that. And for the audience,
Mhm.
the book that you have here, they put America in the air, behind the scenes, building the commercial aircraft industry with the Wright brothers, Bill Boeing, and Donald Douglas. And is this kind of in a similar flavor to Motor City Drama, you were saying, where it's a fictional history where you have conversations with some of these aviation pioneers and kind of reenacting certain scenes from history?
Right. That's what differentiates my books, I think, from any others that I'm aware of, at least on these topics, is that uh, we know that certain things happened. For instance, the Wright brothers had their first flight, and we know that happened. And so what I do is I actually have Wilbur and Orville talking to each other at the start of that first flight and bring these people to life.
Did you always know that you were going to do like this book? Or like, how did this book come about?
Well, I did the first one. I give a lot of presentations on automotive pioneers.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had a lot of research done, and so that was easy. Somebody had suggested to me that, I didn't want to do another history book because there's so many, that I do a fictional history.
Mm-hmm.
And so I did. And it was fun, and I liked it. And then I got thinking, I might want to do another one. And then I had a presentation on the aircraft pioneers. Wright brothers, Bill Boeing, and Donald Douglas, a PowerPoint presentation that I'd given a lot. And so, I had my research done there. Plus, I had worked for the Boeing company back in the 60s for a while, so I had some firsthand experience in the industry. Mm-hmm. And so I thought, well, let's do that one.
Yeah, I did see that in your introduction to the book that you used to work for Boeing.
Mm-hmm.
Really quick, like, how did that come about? Was that like a first job out of college type of thing, or like how exactly did you get started with Boeing?
I was actually working out on the West Coast in human resources, and I went to a meeting of an association that I belonged to, and they had a job fair, and they were looking for somebody to head up the personnel testing part of the human resource department in the commercial airplane division. And I had an interview, and so I moved up to Seattle and took that position, and I got involved in some other things up there too, research, personnel research, and things. So, but it was it was fun.
Was Boeing at that time, was it the size that it is today, or a little bit smaller company back then?
It was pretty good size then.
Yeah.
We were making the 707, the 727. They had just started the 737, and they were designing the 747, and they were designing the SST, which never got built. So it was really the boom time. We hired over 40,000 people in 1 year.
Wow.
Again, we had several locations, also a location in Wichita, Kansas, and others. But yeah, it was boom time. So yeah.
I didn't realize this just until recently. Boeing is, and correct me if I'm wrong, they're not just involved in like commercial airlines, but they do space. Like
they were the prime contractor, I think, on this space station.
Wow.
Yeah, they do a lot of aerospace stuff.
And same thing with like military related things?
Right. Cargo planes and I can't remember right offhand about fighter jets. I know there was one contract that we were competing for when I was there. It was supposed to be an all-purpose jet that would work for the Navy, the Air Force, and the Army, I think, somehow. And we didn't get it. TRW in Texas got it. It just happened that Lyndon Johnson was president then. No political influence, of course, at all. And the thing never did work out for any of the services, as I understand. So it's probably just as well.
I've never heard of TRW. Mm-hmm. Is that still in existence?
Oh, they made computers and electronic stuff to start out with, and then they got into aviation for a while. Yeah, I don't know if they're still in aviation or not.
There's so many, like going through your book, there's so many details of this industry that I just like had no idea about.
Yeah, it is a fascinating industry.
Like as far as Boeing goes, and I don't know if I mentioned this to you last time we met, but I didn't realize Bill Boeing he lived in Detroit.
Yeah, he's born in Detroit.
Born in Detroit, wow. Yeah. His parents were immigrants from Europe.
Yeah.
And they came over.
In fact, if you want, I can read you a little bit from that chapter.
Yeah.
My first chapter is really on the Wright brothers, but we can go back and pick them up if you, whichever way you want to go.
No, yeah,
as long as we're talking about Boeing. Let me just read you an excerpt from this. Chapter 2, Bill Boeing enters the scene. William Edward Boeing was born in Detroit to wealthy parents, his father from Switzerland and his mother from Austria. He dropped out of Yale 1 year before graduating and moved to Washington State, where he bought timberland and set up a lumber company. He also bought a small shipbuilding company in Seattle. He saw a manned flying machine and became fascinated with aircraft. He took lessons at the Glenn Martin Flying School in Los Angeles, and in 1916 purchased one of Martin's planes. It arrived in crates by a railroad from California and was assembled in Seattle. Unfortunately, another pilot crashed the plane and it needed repairs. Before repairing it, Bill Boeing talked with his boat-building partner, Naval Commander George Westervelt, in their shop on Lake Washington. George, the Martin Company says that the parts we need to repair the airplane would not be available for several months. This is really frustrating. It sure is. But what choice do we have? I've been thinking. I think we could build our own plane and build a better one, and we would have it a lot faster. Bill, do you really think we could do that? We've never built anything like it. It's not that complicated. We build boats from wood, just add some cloth and metal, and you have an airplane. Why not? Well, when you put it that way, I guess we could. And they did. Their Boeing Model 1 B&W seaplane had outstanding performance, and they went into business. They got an order for 50 planes from the U.S. Navy and were on their way. So that's how they got started.
Very fascinating.
Yeah.
Around this time that this is going on, so this is like World War I?
Right before World War I, yeah.
Wow. So do you think, was that kind of driving a lot of the innovation in this area? That, hey, there was this demand for these military things, and governments looking for people to produce it for the war effort.
Yeah, that's actually where some of the contracts came from. Was military, and same way with the Wright brothers. They got some contracts for some early from the Army, and for reconnaissance, kind of a reconnaissance plane. So that's where a lot of it came from, and then it evolved into as people started after the First World War started to look for commercial uses, and there were a lot of planes built for the First World War, and they didn't. Once the war was over, they didn't need them. People started buying them and starting their own little airlines, but they carried mail. That's the only way they could make money. They would get contracts to carry mail to speed up the mail delivery. And then only until much later did they start adding passengers. And that was Bill Boeing.
He was the first?
Yeah, he was one of the very first. Yeah. I think the first. He decided that there was a future in that beyond mail, and so he took part of the mail compartment and put in room for 4 passengers and a side door, and started flying passengers. And
Wow.
And then it took many years before it evolved to the point where they could make money off of passengers.
Oh, I see.
And
Okay.
I've got that story in there too. So
This kind of reminds me a little bit unrelated. Have you ever seen the movie The Aviator?
yes, a long time ago, yeah.
Yeah, the Leonardo DiCaprio movie about Howard Hughes.
Yeah.
And I remember there is a portion of the movie where he is talking to, they're doing some sort of negotiation deal with Alec Baldwin's character. I forget. Might have been Pan Am, something like that.
Okay.
And they're trying to negotiate a deal for something to do with airlines. This, and slight tangent, but I sometimes get this confused that, like, say, for example, Boeing is manufacturing the aircraft, but then you have companies like United,
Right.
American, Delta. They are airlines.
Lines, right.
So they're the ones that buy
Right.
the aircraft to then use them to shuttle people
Right.
across the world.
Yeah. Yeah, they're two separate. One builds them and one operates them. Yeah.
So I got to imagine that this business, much like maybe automobiles, like we talked about last time with, Ford, GM, Chrysler, except in a different way, I got to believe that the margins for aircraft are like razor thin, or like airlines are razor thin. Like, you only make a certain amount of these aircraft. And there's only a certain amount of companies that are buying them.
Right.
Delta, United, American, Spirit, JetBlue, what have you. So they're not making a whole lot of these.
Well,
like in
but
a
they
year.
do. They make them to order, so they get the order first,
Uh-huh.
and the pricing is all worked out. So they know they're going to do all right.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
But again, sometimes with the competition, to negotiate an order, the bigger the order, the smaller profit margin the airline wants the aircraft company to make. So yeah, so it's very competitive. And
And later on, I kind of want to, I want to ask you about that again, the
Okay.
competition in this industry. Backtracking from
Okay.
Boeing, like you had brought up, there were the Wright brothers,
right,
which I think kind of many people know about the Wright brothers. The first flight in America, if not the world,
first powered flight.
first powered flight.
There were gliders
Oh,
and there were
okay.
balloons, but the first heavier than air, balloons were filled with air, but the first heavier than air vehicles that were powered flight was the Wright brothers.
And that was in North Carolina?
Yeah, yeah. In fact, I start the book out with that.
Yeah.
And with a conversation. Let me read that if that's okay, and
Absolutely.
then we can talk about it. Chapter 1, the Wright brothers get it all started. They flipped a coin, and Wilbur won. It was December 14th, 1903, on the sandy hills at Kitty Hawk, North Carolina. Will, you get the first flight. The flyer's all set with a 12-horsepower engine that Charlie built. Pretty good accomplishment for our bicycle mechanic, don't you think? Right. It should give us enough power in the two pusher propellers to get it off the ground. Now you hold a wing and run alongside to steady the aircraft as it slides down the sloped track. Once it lifts off, I'm on my own. The flyer cleared the wooden track and fell into the sand after 100 feet in the air with minor damage. I guess we can't call that a successful flight, or after we make some repairs, you get a crack at it. I hope you have better luck. They tried again on December 17th. It was Orville's turn. A photo taken of Orville flying and Wilbur running alongside after he had just let go of the wing became one of the most famous photographs in history. After his first flight, Orville said, I didn't do much better. Not on the third, but on the fourth try that day, Wilbur flew over 800 feet, almost the length of 3 football fields, and was in the air for nearly a minute. History was made. man had flown under power for the first time ever. So that's the way it all started.
Now, so this was, you said Kitty Hawk,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
North Carolina?
Yeah, they lived in Dayton, but they went out there because of the prevailing winds off the Atlantic. And also, it was sandhills, so if they crashed, it wasn't too bad.
I was wondering about that, what the relationship was with, they did the flight in North Carolina,
Mm-hmm.
but they're originally from Ohio?
Right, they had bicycle business built bicycles in Dayton, but they had gotten interested in flight when they were little kids. Their father brought them a toy airplane powered by rubber bands from France. And they started dreaming about what if man could sometime build a plane that man could fly in, not powered by rubber bands, but by an engine. And they kept at it from when they were kids on through. So,
You know what the Wright brothers remind me of, just because they're
Mm-hmm.
brothers, reminds me of last time when we talked about the Dodge brothers a little bit.
yeah.
And I think the Dodge brothers too had a bicycle, or they worked on bicycles.
I believe so,
Something
yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, bicycle was quite an industry for a while in this country. You know, it
Was
was
it
was
really?
the first step from the horse. You know, think about it. The only way man could get anywhere was on a horse or a horse and buggy for quite a while, and then they started with the bicycle, and so you could. And then the bicycle people started thinking about other things and aircrafts and cars, and it just moved right along. Yeah, we kind of forget sometimes that the bicycle was kind of a step in there between the horse and buggy and the car.
No, I totally forget about that sometimes. The picture that comes to my mind is the huge bicycle with the big wheel in the front and then the small wheel in the back. And somebody's riding it in like a top hat
Right,
and
right.
monocle.
Yeah, they had those for a while. Talking about the Wright brothers bicycle, of course, the Greenfield Village has the original bicycle shop from the Wright brothers, moved here from Dayton, by Henry Ford. Now, when you go to Dayton, there are also two original bicycle shops in Dayton, and they're all original because they moved, they grew as they got bigger. So some people, wonder if some of them are all authentic, but they are. And our one here in the Detroit area in Greenfield Village is authentic.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah.
Very, very cool. Now, the Wright brothers, stemming off of that flight in North Carolina, they start to set up their own business around aircraft. And is it again kind of military driven?
Right.
Yeah.
Their first contract to build multiple aircraft was really, they got a contract to build one prototype. But again, the flyer, as they called their plane, the pilot was laying prone, facing forward, and had these two pusher propellers behind. And the Army said, if you'll build a prototype that can hold two people in a seated position, we'll give you $25,000 for this design. And they did. By then they had one called the Flyer 3, which was had gone from a 12 horsepower engine to a 25 horsepower engine. And they were able to have two people sitting so that one could be an observer for the Army and observe the enemy lines and so forth. So that's the way they got a contract for that. And then later they got another contract to build several for the Army if it could meet certain standards, which was a 10-mile round trip at 40 miles an hour over 100 feet in the air.
Wow.
Yeah. And so that really helped them. But that's where the money came from on some of these early, same way with Bill Boeing, building planes for the Navy. And
Now, what ended up happening to the Wright brothers? Like, one of the brothers ended up passing away before the other one.
Right. Yeah, one passed away in 1908 from typhoid fever.
Oh, wow.
And they that was Wilbur Orville and his sister then kept the company for about a year. They sold it. A fellow named Glenn Martin bought it. He kept it for a while. Then he left the company So they renamed it the Wright Aviation Company. And it evolved into something later on got bought by the Curtiss Wright Company, and it became a multi-million-dollar conglomerate. It still exists today. So, and then interesting thing about this fellow, Glenn Martin, that owned it for a while, he started his own company, and he's the one that sold a plane to Bill Boeing.
Oh, okay.
So there were a lot of interesting interactions between these early pioneers, just like in the auto industry.
And is Glenn Martin is this the gentleman that goes on to be Lockheed Martin?
Yeah,
like
Martin Marietta, Lockheed Martin, correct.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Is
it was the largest military plane manufactured during the Second World War. Yeah.
Really? Okay.
Made the fighter planes, the P-40s that the Flying Tigers flew. Yeah,
I've heard of that name before. Yeah. Speaking of creating planes for these war efforts, it was the same thing too. Going back to our conversation on your first book, Motor City Drama, with Henry Ford, or not Henry Ford. Was it his son that they started to build planes in Willow Run?
Right. Well, both Henry and Edsel, but Edsel was more a key person in that. Yeah.
That I had no idea. And Willow Run is that's outside of Detroit, right? That's in Ypsilanti.
Yeah. Right off of 94. Yeah.
Okay.
In fact, they have a Yankee Air Museum there.
Oh, really?
And
okay.
On March 1st, I do presentations before I started the books, and still do. And we have one on the Wright brothers, or actually Orville Wright and his sister Catherine, because we do it in 1925, and Wilbur had passed away by then. So we have an interactive presentations where we answer questions from the audience. A little hint, we pass them out so that we don't get off the wall. Anyway, we're going to be there at Yankee Air Museum on doing that on March 1st, which is a lot of fun. We've been doing those for a while. So.
Oh, that's really cool.
Yeah. It's a neat museum.
I've never been there.
Yeah, you should get there.
Yeah.
It's neat.
Wow.
You can go to their website, and they have different events too. They have open cockpit days when you can look in the cockpits, and they have fundraisers, and they have outdoor aircraft that as well as some stored inside. So
very cool. Have you ever ridden in one of those smaller, like a Cessna or something like that, like a small plane?
Years ago, I was on a business trip in California, and I was supposed to fly out of one of the airports out there, and this fella said, "Oh gosh, that's quite a drive over there. Why don't you take an air taxi into Kennedy Field?" And I said, "Fine." So yeah, I flew right in the second seat up front, next to the pilot, and. Yeah, it was interesting because it was beautiful. We flew by the Statue of Liberty, and that must have been LaGuardia we were going into in New York. Flew by the Statue of Liberty, and all of a sudden the pilot said, "Oh, darn." I said, "What's that?" Said, "Well, there was a accident on one of the runways, and they closed the runway, so we circled for quite a while, and when we landed, I missed my connecting flight back to Detroit. So it took me longer than if I would have done my original schedule." But and I've flown in a couple of other small planes. And speaking of Willow Run, they just acquired the Ford Trimotor that Henry Ford and Edsel built. And it was a commercial airliner for a while, and they just got their first one that's operational. So you can actually buy rides in this Trimotor, and I'm kind of debating. I'd really like to do it, but it was built in the 20s. But they've refurbished it and they checked it out, and they've been doing a lot of training. So I'll probably do it.
And this is like a propeller.
Yeah,
Plane
three propellers. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. Now, moving ahead in this history,
Right.
who was this Mr. Douglas fellow?
Donald Douglas.
Donald Douglas.
Yeah, he had worked for another company in Cincinnati, at the Glenn Martin Company in Cleveland. I'm sorry, in Cleveland.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Glenn
Cleveland,
Martin
Ohio.
had his company in Cleveland, and then he left there and moved out to the West Coast and set up his Douglas Company, and so he became another major contributor there. One of the fascinating stories that I thought was well, let me read it rather than give it away.
Absolutely, yeah.
You'll see why it's interesting. And again, these are all based on history. These things happened. It's just that we don't have a record of the conversations, and I make the conversations up as authentically as I can based on knowing about these people. And so I don't distort history. I feel I'm adding to it. So this is in 1943, Douglas Company. Douglas Company Vice President of Engineering, Rob Krenko, stood near a drafting board as he met with design engineer John Hall at his office at the Douglas El Segundo plant. John, take a look at my sketch here. Oh, it looks like a C-54 military transport. Right, we're going to design the first presidential aircraft by modifying a C-54. Why would the Douglas president need a plane that large, Rob? Not the Douglas president, the president of the United States. You mean Franklin Roosevelt? Yes, we're designing a plane for FDR. That's pretty exciting, damn exciting. Let me show you some of the requirements. I've sketched some rough ideas. Pointing to the sketch, Rob continued. Now here's the president's office, and over there would be the kitchen and dining area. Back here would be the sleeping quarters. Behind there would be seats for staff and the press. Just one issue I haven't worked out yet. What's that? Well, John, we need an elevator. An elevator? What for? To get FDR in his wheelchair up into the cabin. Wow, isn't there any way to get him up the external stairway? He'd have to be carried. And we were told that we couldn't let that be seen. With an elevator, he could be wheeled under the plane and taken up by elevator out of sight. Then an elevator it is. This will be a fun project for my team. Then get started, John. Take my sketches and come out with engineering drawings of the whole interior. Great. We'll get right on it. One question. Do you think I could FDR to autograph one of my drawings? If so, only after he autographs my sketch, said Rob with a smile. The presidential jet went into service in 1944 and was nicknamed the Sacred Cow because of the security surrounding it. FDR only flew in it once, but it was used for a period by President Harry Truman. Yeah. Yeah, people forget FDR really couldn't walk. He had braces, metal braces. And he always, when he did walk, he always had the arm usually of his son or somebody and walked short distances. And he really was just kind of throwing his body and his legs. So most of the time he was in a wheelchair, but at that time they felt it showed a lack of power if your president was in a wheelchair. Mm-hmm. And so, the press would never photograph him in a wheelchair or being carried. There was just agreements about that. Mm-hmm. So it was quite a sensitive issue. So they went to all this trouble to put an elevator in.
Wow.
Yeah.
And he only flew in it one time.
Yeah.
Oh, jeez. Now, but you said.
Well, and he died. He died in office.
Yeah. Yeah.
Although it was his fourth term, and so, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, when was 1946?
He died in 45.
Oh, 45.
In the spring of 45, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and then Truman
took over.
In,
yeah.
Who was his vice president. But then Truman got some use out of the Sacred Cow.
Yeah.
At least.
Right. And then Truman had his own plane.
Did he really?
It was a DC-6. He named it the Independence in recognition of his hometown in Missouri.
Okay.
I don't know. Have you ever been to the Air Force Museum in Dayton?
No.
That is fascinating place to go. It's free,
Hmm.
and when we went, we went one afternoon. I took our grandson and stayed overnight, and then the next morning kind of broke it up. But you really need a full day. And what it has one hangar now that has 4 presidential planes in them,
Wow.
including the 2 that I mentioned, and then 2 of the later ones. So, and you can go in them. You can go in them all. Yeah, it's neat, but it's a great museum.
So, Sacred Cow, Independence, and then there was another one after that, and then
There were two. Then I think the next one, that was a DC-6, was the Independence. That was still propeller, and then there were 2 jets. One, I think the first one was Kennedy's,
Mhm.
and then there was a later jet that's in the museum, and then of course the current one is a 747 that the current presidents use.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And the one that you had mentioned, there was one that the Lyndon Johnson was sworn in on because Kennedy was shot that day.
Right, right.
And you said that plane is at Dayton, the one that Lyndon was sworn in on.
I believe so.
That's a special plane.
I
Wow.
believe so. Yeah, you're stretching my memory here now.
Oh,
I'm pretty sure it is. Yeah,
Yeah.
because it was an older. It was one of the first jets.
wow.
And
That's
I,
really
I
cool.
know I have something in here about it.
No, that's really cool. I didn't realize that we had this many Air Force Ones.
Right,
But
right.
they weren't really called Air Force One until kind of relatively later.
Right, right. And what happened there is they were they were Air Force planes. They were given a numerical designation,
Mm-hmm.
and I think I've got the details somewhere in my book. But just from memory, it there was a commercial airplane that had the same designation as Air Force One, and they almost collided. And so at that time, they decided that they would not have an Air Force numerical designation anymore. But and the way that works is there were 2 presidential aircrafts, but the one that the president's in is always designated as Air Force One. So the minute he steps on it, it becomes Air Force One.
Oh, I didn't know that.
So yeah, but it was an interesting start.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Now, coming into like more, I guess, recent times, I guess it kind of depends how old you are.
Right.
Like, because there's still some of this that is within kind of my age range.
Sure.
But there's this, is it right to call it the jet era?
Yeah.
Now, what distinguishes like a jet versus like planes before that? Is it the propeller?
Right,
that was
right.
on them?
Yeah, the propeller pulls you through the air. Basically, it's slanted and it pulls you through the air.
Okay.
The jet pushes you through the air. It blows the air forcefully out the back and pushes it. So it's a different
Okay.
concept. Yeah.
Because that's where you see the engines on the wings.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
And they call them fan jets, but the fans are really they're not propellers. They're just part of the pulling the air in and helping it to exit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And was Boeing the first one to have a jet?
They had the first commercially successful one, the 707.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that was before your time. working there?
No, we were building those
Oh, really?
when I was at Boeing. Yeah, yeah.
Oh,
In
wow.
fact, I have a timeline in my book,
Mhm.
fortunately, and let me see here. 1958, the 707 came out.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So that was the first really successful large-scale commercial airline,
And
jet airliner.
and was that like when that came out,
Mhm.
do you remember, was it like a really big deal when that came out? Like it
Uh,
made headlines, it
oh yeah,
was
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. It was up until then the DC sixes were pretty much the commercial airplane
Mhm.
that people rode in a lot. The largest one.
I
The
can't
the DC-3 is an interesting one. The Douglas, historically, that's the one that's hanging in the museum at the Henry Ford Museum. Some people wonder why, of all the airplanes that's there. That was the first airplane that airlines could make money on with passengers only, and that was in the 30s.
oh, wow.
I mean, it went from 1903, the Wright brothers, to the 30s before passenger aircraft was profitable. All the time in between, it was either, like you said, building aircraft for military or airmail. So, and the DC-3 was the first one that was able to be commercially successful. So,
When you say mail, is this is pretty
Mhm.
much U.S. Postal Service
Yeah.
because UPS, FedEx, they weren't around.
no.
But I gotta imagine like today,
Mhm.
they must also place
Oh,
orders.
sure.
Yeah,
Yeah, they have their own aircraft. Yeah.
yeah. Amazon, I'm sure
Mhm.
too.
Yeah,
Um,
I'm not sure about them, but
okay.
I'm sure they
Yeah.
have their own aircraft. But I know UPS and FedEx have their.
Hmm.
In fact, FedEx, I think in Tennessee or Kentucky, has a big air base
Mm.
where they kind of operate out of.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, because you've got to get people's packages around the
Right.
country
Right.
somehow.
Right. Yeah, and that's
Yeah.
not going to get less because more and more people are ordering things online now.
Yeah.
And,
Oh yeah. That's all I did for Christmas. I
right.
did everything online.
Yeah.
I've done that the last 2 years, and I never would have thought that I would have done that. But lo and behold, that's kind of the age that we're in. It's funny because I did end up going to the mall one of the days for Christmas, and there was a lot of people there, but it wasn't packed like
Mm-hmm.
the malls that I used to go to when I was younger. So I did kind of notice that there's the mall's not as filled up. Maybe there's some of the spaces in the mall are empty or for lease. So yeah, just things are changing.
Oh yeah, I haven't. I'll be honest, I haven't been in a mall for a long time.
Yeah, it's kind of tough to go when everything's just kind of at your fingertips or on a computer. Yeah, no, that's just the age that we're in. But I don't foresee airplanes. People still need to get places.
Right. Right.
Same thing with cars. Now, moving forward from the birth of that
Mhm.
jet era, there
Yeah.
was for a little bit here the supersonic jets.
Right. Right.
And would you say was this kind of like a failed experiment? Like we didn't really get supersonic jets
right.
like maybe people were hoping for.
Right.
And these were jets that would just go. They could get you to point A to point
Yeah,
B way
faster than the speed of sound. That's why they're
Oh,
called
wow.
supersonic. Yeah, and and that was a problem that when they took off, there was a sonic boom, and it would rattle buildings. and houses, yeah. And so the public didn't like that, and so the U.S. government had invested in the SST, and again, that's when I was at Boeing. In fact, one of my friends, I was part of HR, and he came into me one day and he said, "Wow, I got a wonderful new job. What's that? I'm training director for the SST project." Wow, that's going to be the thing, the SST, and this guy's career is going everywhere. But what happened is the sonic boom thing, became a big thing, and so and then also the government felt that they would not get their money back in time. Originally, they invested in it with the idea of getting their money back, and so they. Because of public outcry with the sonic boom, and because of the Congress said, we're just not going to get our money back, they cut the project off. And the irony is, I had left Boeing then and went to work for HR director and a training director in an insurance company in Seattle, and this fellow that went to work for the SST came to work for me. I mean, he was out of a job. So here I thought his career was going to soar, and he ended up, working for me. But the British did go on. They had the Concorde jet. It was a combination built by Britain and France, and it did run for a while. Mm-hmm. And then again, it was, the tickets were very expensive. They were about double, because I knew somebody once that said they were going to a meeting in Europe, and they were going on the SST, and it was about double the first class fare, because it got you there in half the time. Wow. Practically. So but again, with the sonic boom problems, and again the size, the fact that the tickets were so expensive, and they couldn't figure out an easy way, I guess, to make it profitable. So the Concorde died out too, but it did run for a while. Wow. And there are people around that have ridden in the Concorde as a supersonic jet.
And when did that start to get phased out? Was it like relatively?
Well, I was focusing on U.S. airlines, so I guess I don't have it in my timeline.
That's okay.
But it was running in the 70s and 80s. I know. Okay. I know people who were traveling then in the 70s and 80s, mm-hmm. And so I don't know. I can't remember exactly how long ago it went out. But.
And one thing that comes to mind when mm-hmm. like travel, because I couldn't imagine your travel experience back then mm-hmm. versus what it is today. Is it very different in a commercial aircraft? Like, because one example, mm-hmm. you used to be able to smoke on airplanes.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
and you can't anymore.
Right,
but
right, yeah.
How different was it, back then versus now?
Well, there was that. They kept the air filtering and everything pretty well, but yeah, you might get sitting next to somebody that smoked. The other thing was you actually got a meal. I mean, even in coach, you got a little meal with a chicken breast or something, and gravy and mashed potatoes, and really? And a little dessert. And in coach. And now you get peanuts. Maybe some airlines. Maybe, yeah. I think you have to buy the peanuts. So and it was interesting. Originally, people dressed up to fly. They generally businessmen would wear their suits and ties, and even families that would go, they would at least wear a shirt and slacks, and the women would dress up a little. And of course, now you get on, and people have got their sweatsuits and whatever.
That's kind of what I do.
It's It's the world is changing. Yeah.
Wow.
The one I remember, the first commercial airplane that I flew in was the DC-3. That was the first one that was commercially successful. And the thing that I remember about it, and you can see this if you go to the Henry Ford Museum and you look up at the DC-3 there, you can kind of tell. But the tail wheel was very small, and the two front wheels were under the wings, so it sat at an angle. It literally was at an angle, and you entered at the rear. So you entered the door, and then you walked up. You know,
Okay.
you walked uphill to your seat.
Oh, okay.
And then when they got into the DC-4s, they realized that it was better, you know, and they made the rear wheels so that it was level. But that was the first airliner that I remember traveling in, and remembered walking uphill.
Yeah, I couldn't imagine. You're getting a workout every time you
right.
have to walk. Wow.
But they weren't that huge either, you know. But they were. I forget how many passengers they carried, but they carried a good number.
I was just about to ask you that, because airplanes today, I mean, I don't know how much, like a typical flight, how many passengers. I guess it kind of depends.
Yeah. 300 or so.
Okay.
2 to 300. But interesting story about the 747, and I tell a story in my book. A friend of mine was in market research, and there was a lot of things being written in the paper about this huge 747. You know, it's going to carry 400 people, and people wouldn't travel in it. It was like a cattle car, you know, and blah, blah. And Boeing started to get concerned about it, so they did this little research study, and I won't go into that in detail, but and they found out that it was okay. You know, people would accept that kind of a cabin. So they were really concerned, you know, that people would fly in it. And so it turned out that it worked out fine. You know, if you price it right, people are going to fly in it.
And this is like 747s are still here.
No, they just discontinued, I think, last year or so. They discontinued making them. There's still some flying, mostly I think cargo, and there might be some airlines overseas that use them. But yeah, the newer jets are so much more economical. You know, the engines are more economical, and also they're finding by scheduling routes better, they don't need that many people at one time. They were started flying, you know, not full enough.
Okay.
And so by making new routes and everything, and of course the new routes are you tend to travel on more planes, and you connect, and you want to connect quickly, and as we saw just recently, that stuff's all like clockwork. And if you have a weather problem or a computer problem, it just, because planes aren't on the ground very long, you know, and so your plane is your flight is dependent on where did your plane come from. Right. If your plane was in Denver in a snowstorm, didn't matter. If you're in Florida and that plane coming in was supposed to take you out of Florida and it's not there, you don't go. So all of this just-in-time tight scheduling produces profits, and you can use smaller planes, but when things go wrong, they really go wrong.
There's two things that just popped in my head. One of them, have you ever flown in a private plane?
Yeah, I did. I was a consultant, and I did some work for a company and Federal Mogul, and they said, we want you to go down and do we did these career interviews where we did some testing and interviewing people help them plan the rest of their career and so forth. And they said, we want you to go down and do one of these down in Alabama. And so they said, you can fly on the company plane. So I flew on a Lear business jet. Yeah.
What was that
Yeah.
experience
Yeah,
like?
that was neat. Yeah.
Yeah.
You go out to the airport, metro, and there's a separate hangar, and you kind of sit around and have some coffee, and the pilot arrives, and he said, "Everybody here?" Yep, okay. You get in and you go. And while you're at your meetings, the pilot plays golf, I think. And then, when you're ready to go, you come back. Yeah, it's very nice. Very nice.
I wish I hope hopefully one day I get that experience. Actually, I don't know if you've heard of, I forget the company's name. They are a company that sets up memberships for private jet flights.
Mm-hmm.
So you can purchase a membership, like tiered memberships,
Mm-hmm.
to get a certain amount of private jet flights in a year,
Right.
based on availability. Plus, they do book it with like other
Mm-hmm.
small set of passengers as well. And I remember the fee for like just the basic
Mm-hmm.
tier was nothing like insurmountable. I mean, it was
Mm-hmm.
still expensive, but
Well, and again, primarily a lot of businesses do that. They used to have their own corporate jets, uh, like Federal Mogul, and I don't know now, but some of them don't do that anymore. They do the sharing
okay,
thing.
it's kind of like an Uber,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
for flights.
Um,
And that was, you said, Lear.
Lear, yeah, yeah.
And the companies that like we've mentioned throughout
Mm-hmm.
so far, do they get into the private jet market as well, like Boeing or?
No, they didn't. They were all different
Yeah.
different companies. Yeah, they. I think the big companies making the big airliners were so set up. Their factories are big. Their processes are big, and I just think, and business has been growing.
Yeah.
And they need new models. I've got a fun little story here on business aircraft.
Oh, please, yeah.
And again, this is fiction, okay? The aircrafts are authentic, and these people do own these airplanes. But obviously, I made up the story, and it goes like this: Tom Cruise, Jim Carrey, and Oprah Winfrey were chatting at a recent after party for the Academy Awards. Jim opened the conversation. "So, Tom, I understand you have a Gulfstream." "So do I. What model is yours?" "Gulfstream G4. How about yours?" "A Gulfstream G5. Looks like mine is bigger, Tom." "Not bragging, you understand," said Jim with a grin. "Oprah, I hear you have a Gulfstream too. What model does the little lady have?" "The little lady just has a little Gulfstream 650. "Wow, yours is even bigger than mine." I was underestimated for years, and so it's fun now to be the big dog." With a smile, she started to walk away, then turned and added, "I'll leave you boys to talk about your little toys." And so those people do own those particular aircraft. Yeah. And I've got a picture. I've got some pictures in this book. I didn't in the other one, but I have a picture of the interior of the Gulfstream 650, and they're beautiful.
Gosh, I can't imagine how expensive those are. They got to be pretty expensive.
Yeah, I
right?
have no idea price wise.
Plus fuel,
Right.
Plus
right.
paying the pilot,
Yeah, insurance and hangar space.
hangar.
And yeah. You got a big investment there.
It's kind of like the same thing with, I imagine, on a smaller scale, of like owning a boat, because
Right.
you need a place to put the boat.
Right.
The insurance on that. Those
Maintenance.
are maintenance.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's got to be.
Well, those folks have enough money that it doesn't matter.
Tom Cruise, Oprah Winfrey. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. The other thing before I forget, Russell, you had mentioned market research, and like you had said your friend was doing market research. You've yourself have participated in market research for Boeing and stuff?
Yeah, that one study, the jumbo jets, what I mentioned about their Boeing's concern about the 747,
Uh-huh.
and
And you're basically just kind of going out there and asking people like, hey, what do you think? Would you ride in something like this,
right, right.
etc.?
I was trying to see if. Oh, here it is. Yeah, here's the story that I have about this, and this was. I actually attended this, and as I mentioned, Boeing was concerned about the publicity that articles in the press, people wouldn't ride in this huge cattle car with 400 other passengers, and
Mm-hmm.
so Boeing market research people conducted some studies to evaluate these concerns. People were invited to an event in a mock-up of a 747 cabin. Everett Johnson from Market Research greeted the guests. Good morning. Welcome to our new 747. Have a soft drink and coffee and relax. As you can see, this wide-body passenger cabin has 10 seats, to a row and 2 aisles. We'd like you to fill out the questionnaire we provided asking for your reaction to this cabin. You notice that it asks if you would fly in this cabin for standard ticket prices or only if the prices were reduced. It also asks if you like it so much you would actually pay a higher ticket price to travel in it. After the questionnaires were completed, Everett opened up for discussion. One young man spoke up. I don't know about everyone else, but I really like the larger size of the cabin. I feel I'm sitting in a small movie theater rather than a cramped airplane cabin. A middle-aged woman added, I agree. I have no problem traveling in this plane. I hope it comes out soon. A young man with glasses spoke up. My only concern is boarding and deplaning. How can all these people get on and off in a reasonable time? Everett explained, this is an important issue. We'll be boarding through both a front and a rear entrance, which would speed things up. Also, boarding gradually by rows will help move it more smoothly. But to be honest, it probably will take a few more minutes longer to board. When the surveys from these events were tallied, the results were very encouraging to Boeing. They showed that most people would fly the 747 at normal ticket prices, but a very few would only fly it for reduced rates. Some people at the event even indicated they would pay slightly more to fly in this larger cabin. This study helped Boeing proceed with the development of the 747 with confidence that the public would accept it. Yeah, so my friend Everett Johnson was the director of that project, and he invited me to come and sit. And it was me speaking up. I felt like it was sitting in a little movie theater,
Yeah.
So,
And
so
for the cabin that you had mentioned, do they have like a replica cabin of like what it would look like?
yeah, it was a full-sized, just one segment of the cabin. It didn't have the first class section or the, cockpit or anything. But yeah, it was built just exactly like a 747 cabin. It was that important to them, to get some reaction.
And how many are you having? A lot, like many people participate in this, like thousands upon thousands of people?
I don't remember how many. No, they didn't have the time to do that. I would say they must have had, they did them in groups. I'm sure several hundred.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they, I don't know what kind of demographics they used. I didn't ask them about that. But
because this reminds me of, do you remember Coca-Cola and the new Coke that they had?
yeah.
It's funny because I finished a book called Influence by Robert Cialdini, if you've ever heard of that book.
No.
And he talks about there's 7 levers of influence. And one of them, there's reciprocity, authority, social proof, commitment and consistency, unity, and scarcity. I think I got all. I think that's 7. Might be missing one. But he talks about the new Coke fiasco as far as the scarcity lever of influence, because in market research, he was saying Coca-Cola did a lot of market research for the new Coke, and they saw that people preferred it over their original formula. But then when they released it, they pulled original Coke So they
Mm-hmm.
only offered New Coke. And he said, well, now original Coca-Cola is now the scarce
Yeah.
resource. And there was this huge backlash because you're taking away a
Mm-hmm.
person's option at the original
Right.
Coca-Cola.
Yeah, I remember that. That was funny.
Because in the market research,
Yeah.
there you had both.
Yeah. Yeah.
But then when it actually like went live,
Yeah.
out in production, it's like you only had New Coke as a choice. So
Yeah. Well,
I just remember him
market
talking.
research can take you down. So, a couple of things we haven't talked about, I guess, are some local airplane manufacturers.
Oh
Um,
right, yeah.
and uh,
Eddie Stinson.
Eddie
Was it?
Stinson is one right here in Northville. And Eddie was taught by the Wright brothers to fly, and then he became an Army flight instructor, and then he started his own airline. And his sister is one that kind of got him interested. She flew before he did. And again, at the Henry Ford Museum, and you look up, in the little aviation room, there's a airplane up there with a woman pilot, and that's Eddie's sister.
Huh.
And she was called a flying schoolgirl because she was so young. She got her pilot's license at age 21, the fourth woman in the U.S. to do it. Anyway, she inspired Eddie, and so he had been a flight instructor during World War II or World War I, and then he'd been a test pilot for a fellow named Bill Stout, who we can talk about, who had an aircraft company that the Fords bought.
Okay.
But anyway, Eddie, I've got a little thing in here where Eddie started his aircraft company, and here in Northville, and then E.L. Cord, the developer of the Cord automobile, visited Eddie in 1929, and by then he had moved out of Northville to a bigger plant down near Metro Airport, which is now Metro Airport. And I've got this little conversation. He says, "This is E.L. Cord. Nice to meet you, Eddie. I bought one of your planes after a trip to Florida. I took flying lessons there and then flew it back to Auburn, Indiana. Great aircraft. Thank you. What brings you to Detroit? I want to get into the aircraft business. Well, you already have the Auburn Automobile Company, Checker Cab, several other companies. Why aircraft? It's a wave of the future for long-range transportation, Eddie. I'm also starting an airline, Century Airlines. So how can I help you? How about selling you some Stinson airplanes for your airline? You can help me even more. My airline needs larger planes than you make now. So I'd like to buy into your company so you would have the capital to develop a larger aircraft, such as a tri-motor model. Well, that's quite a surprise. Sounds intriguing, though. I've been thinking about building a larger model, and the capital would make that possible. How much an investment are you thinking about? About 60% would be right for me. Oh, that would give you controlling interest. I don't know if I want to give up control of the company I started. I understand, Eddie, but this would offer you a new model and a guaranteed big customer, because my airline would buy Stinson's. When you put it that way, it makes sense. My name stays on the company, right? Of course, Stinson has a good reputation. There's no need to make a change. Let me sit down with my attorney and look this over, E.L. I hope we can do it. I'm excited to get into this field big time. Well, a deal was made. Cord became a major stockholder in Stinson, and in 1930, Cord's Century Airlines bought 100 aircraft from Stinson Aircraft. In 1932, Century was purchased by the Aviation Corporation and eventually became American Airlines. So little Stinson Aircraft Company had something to do with the formation of American Airlines, and then Stinson Aircraft was sold to Piper Aircraft in 1950. They modified one original Stinson design into the successful Piper Apache, the world's first all-metal twin-engine aircraft for personal use. Eddie Stinson was killed in an air crash while on a sales trip in 1932 at age 38. He had logged more flight hours than any other pilot at the time and had contributed to the development of Piper Aircraft and American Airlines. So we got kind of a local aviation hero here that not a lot of people know about. But his, his plane called the Detroiter is at the Henry Ford Museum.
I,
So
I can't imagine where in this city did he have this company. I mean, I know Northville was way different.
it's where the car wash is.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
And they
Wow.
used to build the fuselage on one floor and the wings on the other. And there was no airfield here, so they would truck them out, and they had an airfield out on Beck Road. And they'd assemble them there and fly out.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's really cool. I didn't know that about our history, like
Yeah.
here in Metro Detroit, that, like you had mentioned, we had talked about Bill Boeing earlier,
Right.
and then obviously the Fords producing aircraft. Eddie Stinson, I had no idea about until reading your book.
Well, talking about Henry, the I had mentioned that Eddie Stinson was a test pilot for Bill Stout, and let me read you this little bit on Ford.
Yeah.
Henry Ford and his son Edsel were having lunch at the Ford headquarters in Dearborn one day in 1924. Edsel, opening the conversation, said, "Father, I've been thinking about the Stout Metal Aircraft Company that we own stock in. I think we should buy out Bill Stout. And build airplanes? We have a lot on our hands, and with building enough Model Ts to keep up with orders. Hear me out. Aviation is going to become the major means for travel. For long distances, it sure beats the automobile and is faster than the train. I think we should get in on the ground floor." Can't disagree with your point, Edsel, but I'm not sure we should take something else like this. Why not? You took on building automobiles before they were accepted. Worked out pretty well, didn't it? No doubt about that. There's plenty of opportunity here, that's for sure, but I'm concerned about the safety of airplanes. If a car engine quits, you just pull over till you can fix it. Can't do that with an airplane. I agree, Father. I've been looking into adding 2 more engines to Stout's design. That would provide a big margin of safety. And as all-metal construction is already a major safety advantage, it has it all over the wood and cloth construction of most airplanes. Edsel, if you think you can devote the time to this project, go ahead and follow up on it. I guess I wouldn't mind seeing the Ford name on flying machines. And it would be fun to be a real pioneer again in the transportation industry. Well, Edsel followed up. They bought out Stout, launched the Ford Trimotor plane, powered by 3 engines, set up Ford Transportation Service, cargo service, passenger service, and so forth. But they, during the Depression, they had to retreat back and felt they could only, have the automobile business survive, and they got out of the aircraft business. But without the Depression, there probably would be a major aircraft manufacturer.
To see, Ford, the Ford logo on airline,
Yeah.
or on aircraft, that would be something.
Well, there are some neat pictures that you can see. They had the Ford airline. They used to have cargo service and then passenger service in the Midwest. I think Chicago, Cleveland, and Detroit. And
I didn't know that. Wow.
Yeah, and the airport was there right near Greenfield Village, which is now the Ford test track.
Okay.
And then the Dearborn Inn, which was right across the street from it, was the world's first airport hotel. So you could fly in, and then stay at the Dearborn Inn.
Okay. Kind of similar to how, like at Metro Airport, there's the Westin that's like connected right to it.
Yeah.
Where, like, if you stay at the Westin, you go through. It has its own TSA, I think.
Right.
Where you just, you come down from your room and you walk right through, and you're on your way to your terminal. Yeah. Oh, that's really cool. Russell, I wanted to ask you too, as we kind of wrapping things up, what's next for you after this book?
I don't know.
Do you have another book in mind?
Not really. I like to write about things I know, and I had worked in the automotive supplier industry for the Fruhoff Corporation, which owned Kelsey Hayes, and we made a lot of parts. I did a lot of training, management training and things in auto supplier plants in the U.S. and Canada. So I had a comfort level there. And of course, it's growing up in Detroit with the museum and Greenfield Village, you just can't help but be interested in automotive history. So, and then I had worked at Boeing and had this experience and had put together a PowerPoint on that. So, I don't know. It's at this point, I might be just continue with my presentations. We do interactive presentations, and again, I don't think there are any books like we're getting ready to do one on Franklin Eleanor Roosevelt, and where I portray Franklin Roosevelt, and my actress friend portrays Eleanor, and that's the one that similar to the one that we're doing at the Yankee Air Museum, interactive. But I don't see any book opportunities there because there are just, again, books on those people. And in some cases, there are books with quotes and conversations. They're written more in the modern day. So I don't know. This may be the it for the books right now.
Yeah. And as far as your presentations go, how many of those do you do in a year? Or is...
well, before the pandemic, I counted up, I did 24 1 year, about 2 a month.
Yeah.
And then it dropped down to about, first year of the COVID, I think it dropped down to about 8,
Wow.
and some of them were Zoom, most of them were Zoom. And now they're building back up. I'm kind of back up to about once a month now.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's
a lot
good.
of places, libraries and independent living facilities and community centers and so forth, historical societies, are getting back into having people there. I was just at the Livonia Library. We just did the Orville and Catherine Wright one there at the Livonia Library last week, and
Nice.
so it's starting to pick up. A lot of fun.
And is this mostly Michigan area? Or do you ever go out of state?
Yeah.
Good afternoon, Northville District Library. If you're feeling stressed today, come upstairs and visit our therapy dogs. They will be here from 12 to 2 p.m. And there's also games,
Oh, that's funny.
bubble wrap, and a hot cocoa buffet. They are upstairs in the Carlo meeting room.
I might check that out.
I imagine we'll edit that.
Yeah.
Edit that.
But you've had to travel to other
Yeah,
states.
yeah.
and stuff?
Not a lot, but I did people hear about me, through various associations and things. So I was invited to do a presentation down in Florida for an automotive group.
Oh, that's cool.
And then a company that did marketing for some of the independent living facilities here in this area also did marketing for a company in California, and I went out and portrayed Franklin Roosevelt out in California. And we have a client down in Indiana, independent living facility, that we do almost all of our interactive ones for. They invite people in for lunch and the show, and then tell them what a nice place it is to live. So it's a marketing event. Yeah. So a few outside of Michigan.
Wow. Yeah. So you're staying pretty busy.
Yeah, I'm staying pretty busy.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
And I'm very pleased. In January 30th, I'll be celebrating my 86th birthday. So I'm happy to be active and having fun.
Wow.
Yeah.
I would not have guessed that.
Yeah, I do fool people.
Wow. Russell, you are older than my grandfather. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, again, I'm fortunate. My body is kept in relatively good shape, and I'm doing things I enjoy, and hope to continue.
What is that the secret? Like just staying active?
I think, yeah.
Yeah.
Doing things you enjoy, and this is kind of my third career. I was an organizational psychologist for a while in industry with Boeing, and insurance companies and Fruhoff, and then I kind of semi-retired and did personal. I'm a licensed psychologist. I did organizational psych, but then I went into individual. Did a lot of individual counseling and therapy in this area for a while. And then I retired from that. And before I retired from that, I started doing the presentations and then writing the books. So this is my third career, I guess.
Wow.
I think I'll probably continue this one. I don't see another career. I don't sing very well.
You know, my dad retired, quote unquote, a year or two ago, but he went back into the business that he got out of. And I think it might be because he just wasn't too much to do,
Right.
at home and stuff.
You know, some people can play golf and relax, and that's wonderful. I play really bad golf, and I enjoy it, but, you know, I can't do it that much, especially in Michigan.
Yeah.
And, I think, you know, having something that you really enjoy to do is very important. And, many people that I know have retired and then become consultants. And one interesting guy I did some coaching with, and he said, I retired and I'm getting more work than I want. You know, I just didn't want to be that busy. And I said, well, I'll tell you what you do. You slowly increase your fees. And at some point, you'll hit just the right spot. And if you go too far, you won't get as much work, and then you'll know.
I like that.
Yeah.
Slowly
So you can control it.
Yeah. My dad likes to tell me sometimes, like, you always have a choice in anything. And I remember I had a football coach too that, you know, he had a saying, the easiest thing you can do in life is just say, I quit. And just, you know, walk away from just, yep, I don't want to do it anymore. But, you know, he was kind of telling it to us while we're running up and down the field. Like, you know, easiest thing to do is say, I quit, and think about the many, many students in the school who aren't playing football.
Right.
But you guys are here, and you guys are here because, well, for various reasons, assuming you love this sport.
Right.
And I mean, same thing with why I'm doing what I'm doing now. I love it. I love having these conversations with people, and I've learned a ton. I've learned a ton today just from your book.
Good.
So I want to thank you very much for meeting up with me again. Okay. And I hope to have you back again in the future, talk about a new project you're working on. Or your background. I forgot. I think you told me that the first time too, that you were in psychology. And, you know, maybe we can do that in the future. Just talk about psychology and your career in that. Okay. I would be fascinated to know more about that.
Or we could talk about some of the presentations, the interactive ones and so forth.
Oh, that'd be awesome too. Yeah. Well, Russell,
I could portray a few characters. We could have Mark Twain. We could have FDR, and read a few quotes from each of these. Yeah, that would be fun.
Russell, where's if people want to find your work, is your website the best place?
Yes.
Okay.
Dore Productions, all one word, DORE Productions .weebly, WEEBLY.com.
And I'll include a link to that in the description.
And I've got a list of all the presentations there, the interactive ones and the PowerPoint ones, and got some interviews there, some video clips, and I've got some a schedule of all the public things coming up. So, for instance, if somebody wanted to know when the Yankee Air Museum one is, and then we've got some other ones scheduled in the summer. Any that are open to the public, I post there. And,
very cool.
Like to have people come out. That's what it's all about.
Awesome. Well, I'll include links to that. I'll include a link to your book as well.
Okay.
And thank you very much, Russell.
Okay.
This has been a lot of fun.
Good.
And thank you everybody for listening out there. My name is Chris. This has been Chee-Tash. Take care, everybody.